Good thing she doesn't know about my stash. I'm leaving.
Baby's mad? Melissa giggled, twirling her fork through the pasta like she hadn't just dropped a bomb across our dinner table. Come on, Jake. It's not like I planned to be there. I set down my wine glass with deliberate calm, watching her performance. 3 years together, and she still thought I was stupid enough to buy her act. The wedding invitation hidden in my jacket pocket felt warm against my chest. Funny how Rachel Ford's handwriting looked nothing like accident. Not mad at all, I said, my voice steady as stone. Melissa's smile faltered for half a second. She'd expected fireworks, tears, maybe some jealous tantrum about her showing up at Dylan Hayes' wedding. Instead, she got the one thing that always unnerved her, my complete composure. Really? She leaned forward, probing. Because you have that look. What look? That scary calm thing you do when you're plotting something. I almost laughed. If she only knew what I was plotting, she'd choke on her lies right here in Romanos. But Melissa Grant had always been better at dishing out manipulation than recognizing it coming back at her. Just thinking, I said, pulling out my phone to check the time. The wedding invitation peeked out for a split second, long enough for her to catch the gold lettering, if she'd been paying attention. But Melissa was too busy crafting her next lie to notice. Thinking about what? How funny life can be, sometimes. I slipped the phone back into my jacket, the invitation crackling softly. You never know who you'll run into at these things. She laughed high and sharp. God, you're being weird tonight. It was just a wedding, Jake. Dylan's cousin insisted I come since I was already in town for that marketing conference. You know how pushy rich families can be. The lies rolled off her tongue like water. No conference had been scheduled that weekend. I'd checked her company calendar weeks ago when she first started acting strange. No cousin had invited her either. Melissa Grant had RSVP'd to that wedding months in advance, back when she thought I'd never find out. Of course, I said. Must have been awkward seeing Dylan get married. Not really. She shrugged, but her shoulders were too tight. Ancient history, you know. We're completely over each other. Ancient history. That's what she called the man she'd been texting at midnight for the past 2 months. The same man whose wedding photos she'd been tagged in, looking radiant in a burgundy dress that cost more than most people's rent. The same wedding where she deliberately positioned herself in every group shot like she belonged there. I'd seen the photos before she'd had a chance to untag herself. Modern technology was beautiful that way. Everything left a digital footprint, even carefully orchestrated lies. I'm glad you're okay with it, I said, signaling the waiter for the check. Ready to head home? Melissa nodded, still studying my face like she was trying to crack a code. She had no idea I'd already broken hers weeks ago. The drive home was quiet, filled with her occasional nervous chatter about work deadlines and weekend plans. I made appropriate sounds of interest while mentally reviewing tomorrow's schedule. Rachel Ford was expecting me at 2 o'clock sharp for a final fitting. Amazing how helpful people could be when they discovered their cousin's wedding was being crashed by a lying ex-girlfriend. Jake? Melissa's voice was smaller now, uncertain. You're really not mad. I pulled into our driveway, the motion sensor lights flooding the car with harsh white light. In that brightness, I could see everything clearly. The guilt written in the tight lines around her eyes, the way she clutched her purse like a shield, the expensive lipstick that had been perfectly applied for someone who'd supposedly stumbled into a wedding by accident. Melissa, I said, turning to face her fully for the first time all evening. I'm not mad. I'm impressed. Impressed? It takes real skill to lie that smoothly. I opened my car door, ending the conversation before she could respond. See you tomorrow night. She sat in the passenger seat for a full minute after I'd walked inside, probably trying to decode what I'd meant, but Melissa had always been better at giving puzzles than solving them. I poured myself a scotch and pulled out the wedding invitation properly this time, reading Rachel's elegant script again. Maid of honor. Rachel Ford cordially invites Jake Lawson as her +1 to celebrate the union of Dylan Hayes and Catherine Mills. The ceremony would begin at 4 o'clock sharp, followed by dinner and dancing under the stars. Melissa thought she'd been so clever, telling me she'd be spending Saturday with her college roommate in the city. A girls' day, she'd called it. Spa treatments and shopping, maybe dinner at that new sushi place. She'd even kissed my cheek and promised to bring me back something nice. What she'd actually brought me back was a collection of lies wrapped up in guilt and topped with that infuriating giggle. But tomorrow, Melissa Grant was going to learn that some games had consequences she'd never seen coming. I finished my scotch and headed upstairs, already planning my outfit for the wedding, something sharp and confident. Something that would photograph well, something that would make her smile disappear forever. The first time I suspected Melissa was lying about Dylan's wedding was 3 weeks ago, when she mentioned not being invited. "It's so weird," she'd said, curled up on our couch in her favorite silk pajamas. "Dylan and I dated for 2 years, but Catherine apparently decided to keep the guest list small. Family only." She'd said it with just the right amount of hurt disappointment, like she was genuinely wounded by the exclusion. But I'd caught the way her eyes shifted left when she delivered the line, a tell I'd noticed during our entire relationship whenever she bent the truth. "That does seem odd," I'd replied, not looking up from my laptop. "Especially since you two ended things amicably." "Exactly!" She'd brightened at my apparent sympathy. "I mean, I'm happy for them, obviously. I just thought after everything Dylan and I shared, I'd at least get an invitation." You know, I'd made appropriate sounds of agreement while mentally filing away every word. Melissa Grant was many things. Beautiful, charming, socially brilliant when she wanted to be, but she was a terrible liar when you knew what to look for. The second red flag came a week later, during her supposed girls' brunch with college friends. She'd left the house at 10 in the morning wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, claiming they were meeting at some trendy place downtown. But when I'd checked our shared location services that afternoon, her phone had been pinging from the opposite side of the city, near the upscale district where Dylan's family lived. The third and final confirmation came through pure accident. I'd been at a networking mixer for my consulting firm, making small talk with potential clients over watered-down cocktails and stale canapes, when I'd overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. "I just hope my cousin's ex-girlfriend doesn't cause drama at the wedding," a woman had been saying to her companion. "Dylan's being too nice about the whole thing, but honestly, Melissa Grant has always been a bit of a spotlight seeker." I turned around slowly, drink in hand, and found myself looking at an elegant brunette in her late 20s. She had the kind of understated confidence that came with old money and good breeding, exactly the type of person who would be related to Dylan Hayes. "Excuse me," I'd said, approaching with my most disarming smile. "I couldn't help overhearing you mention Melissa Grant. I think I know her." The woman's eyebrows had risen with interest. "Really? How?" "We've been dating for 3 years." I'd watched her face transform from curiosity to something approaching horror. "I'm Jake Lawson." "Oh my God." She'd extended her hand immediately. "I'm Rachel Ford, Dylan's cousin. And apparently, we need to talk." That conversation had led to coffee, which had led to a very enlightening discussion about Melissa's version of events versus reality. According to Rachel, Melissa hadn't just been invited to the wedding. She'd RSVP'd months ago and had been in regular contact with Dylan throughout their engagement. The family was tolerating her presence for Dylan's sake, but everyone knew she was hoping to insert herself into the celebration. "She keeps posting cryptic things on social media," Rachel had explained, stirring her latte with obvious frustration. "Quotes about supporting people you once loved and celebrating new chapters. My grandmother thinks she's planning something dramatic." "Like what?" "Who knows? An objection during the ceremony? Some kind of speech during the reception?" Melissa always did love being the center of attention. I'd sat back in my chair, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Melissa's recent behavior suddenly made perfect sense. The secretive phone calls, the new clothes she claimed were for work events, the way she'd been subtly fishing for information about my weekend plans. "She told me she wasn't invited," I'd said finally. Rachel's laugh had been sharp with recognition. "Of course she did. That way when photos surface, she can play the victim." Poor Melissa, showing up at her ex's wedding because she's so magnanimous and mature. Her voice had dripped with sarcasm. "Trust me, I know her type." "What are you planning to do about it?" "Honestly, nothing. Dylan won't let us uninvite her at this point, and Catherine's too classy to cause a scene. We're just hoping she behaves herself." That's when the idea had struck me, so perfect and symmetrical that I'd almost laughed out loud. "What if I told you there was a way to handle the Melissa situation without anyone having to be the bad guy?" Rachel's eyes had narrowed with interest. I'm listening. You need a date for the wedding, right? Maid of honor duties can be lonely. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting that Melissa Grant is about to learn that two can play her games. I'd pulled out my phone, showing Rachel a photo of Melissa and me from last Christmas, and I'm very good at games. Rachel had stared at the photo for a long moment, then looked back at me with something like admiration. You know what? I like you, Jake Lawson. I like you a lot. The invitation had arrived 3 days later, hand-delivered to my office with a note. Looking forward to Saturday. This is going to be fun. And now here I was, hanging up my suit for tomorrow while Melissa brushed her teeth in our shared bathroom, completely oblivious to the storm she'd created for herself. You're being really quiet tonight, she called through the bathroom door. Are you sure everything's okay? Everything's perfect, I called back and meant every word. Tomorrow, Melissa Grant was going to get exactly what she deserved, and I was going to enjoy every second of watching her world collapse. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn sunshine that made everything look like a magazine cover. Perfect wedding weather, I noted with satisfaction as I sipped my coffee and watched Melissa fuss over her outfit through our bedroom window. She'd been up since 6, trying on different combinations of clothes for her supposed day with the girls. I'd counted at least 4 outfit changes, each one more carefully calculated than the last. The final choice, a flowing midi dress in deep emerald green that brought out her eyes, was definitely not spa day attire. I'll probably be home around 9, she'd said over breakfast, not quite meeting my gaze. Sarah wants to check out this new wine bar after dinner. Sarah, her college roommate who lived in Portland and hadn't visited in 2 years. I'd verified that much with a quick check of social media, but I'd simply nodded and kissed her cheek like a trusting boyfriend should. Have fun, I'd said. I'll probably just watch the game and catch up on some reading. The lie had rolled off my tongue as smoothly as hers did. We really were perfect for each other in the worst possible way. After Melissa left in a cloud of expensive perfume and nervous energy, I allowed myself exactly 1 hour of satisfaction before beginning my own preparations. The suit I'd chosen was charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe, expensive enough to signal that I belonged at a high-end wedding, tailored perfectly to make the right impression on Dylan's family and friends. Rachel had texted me that morning with final details. Ceremony at 4, photos immediately after, cocktail hour at 6, dinner at 7:30. She'd also included a seating chart that showed me placed at the maid of honor's table, directly in Melissa's line of sight, no matter where she ended up sitting. Perfect, I'd texted back. See you at 4. Can't wait to see her face, had been Rachel's immediate response. By 3:15, I was dressed and ready, checking my appearance one final time in the full-length mirror. The man looking back at me was polished, confident, and completely composed, exactly the image I wanted to project when I walked into that ceremony. The venue was a sprawling estate in the hills outside the city, the kind of place that charged more for flowers than most people made in a month. I parked near the back of the lot, timing my arrival to coincide with the final seating of guests. Late enough to make an entrance, early enough to avoid missing anything important. Rachel was waiting near the entrance in a stunning burgundy gown that complemented her dark hair perfectly. She spotted me immediately and broke into a genuine smile that had nothing to do with our shared scheme and everything to do with actual attraction. You look amazing, she said, linking her arm through mine with practiced ease. Ready for this? Born ready, I replied, and realized I meant it. The ceremony space was breathtaking. Rows of white chairs arranged on a manicured lawn, with the altar positioned under a canopy of twisted oak branches draped in fairy lights. Dylan stood at the front in a classic black tuxedo, his face bright with nervous anticipation. And there, 3 rows from the front on the bride's side, sat Melissa Grant. She'd chosen her spot carefully, close enough to be visible in the wide shots, positioned where she could catch Dylan's eye during quiet moments. Her emerald dress stood out beautifully against the autumn backdrop, and she'd styled her blonde hair in loose waves that caught the light perfectly. She looked radiant, confident, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. Rachel and I paused at the back of the aisle, ostensibly so she could check her bouquet and adjust her dress. In reality, we were giving every guest a chance to notice us together, to register the handsome couple that had just arrived. I spotted several phones being raised for photos, the modern wedding reflex in action. Perfect. Ready? Rachel murmured. Let's do this. We walked down the aisle with the unhurried confidence of people who absolutely belonged there. Rachel's hand rested lightly on my arm, her smile serene and proprietary. To anyone watching, we looked like exactly what we were supposed to be, the maid of honor and her distinguished date. I kept my eyes forward, focused on Dylan and the approaching altar. But in my peripheral vision, I caught the exact moment Melissa registered my presence. Her head turned first, drawn by some instinct that something was wrong. Then her body followed, twisting in her chair to get a better look. I watched her expressions cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally something approaching panic. Her mouth actually fell open. Rachel and I took our designated seats in the front row, and I finally allowed myself to look directly at Melissa. She was staring at us with the kind of naked shock that couldn't be hidden or explained away. Her face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup, and her hands were gripping the edge of her chair like anchors. I gave her the slightest nod of acknowledgement, polite, distant, utterly composed. The kind of greeting you'd give an acquaintance you'd run into unexpectedly. Then I turned my attention to the altar and waited for the ceremony to begin. Behind me, I could hear the soft buzz of whispered conversations as other guests noticed the drama unfolding. Phones were definitely out now, capturing every moment of what was already shaping up to be the most memorable wedding of the season. Melissa Grant had wanted to make an impression at this wedding. Mission accomplished. Catherine Mills was a radiant bride, walking down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my car. But I found myself far more interested in watching Melissa's reaction to the ceremony than the actual vows being exchanged. She was doing her best to appear composed, but I could see the cracks in her facade from my position in the front row. Her smile was too bright, her posture too rigid, and she kept glancing in my direction every few minutes like she was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. The officiant was droning on about love and commitment and the sacred bond of marriage, all the traditional words that Dylan and Catherine were probably too nervous to really hear. But I was absorbing every word, thinking about the vows Melissa and I had never made and now never would. Do you, Dylan, take Catherine to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, forsaking all others as long as you both shall live? I do. Dylan's voice was strong and clear, carrying across the lawn without amplification. Forsaking all others. I wondered if Melissa was thinking about those words, about the promises she'd made to me in smaller ways over the past 3 years. Promises about honesty, trust, building a future together. Promises she'd broken for the chance to play dress-up at her ex-boyfriend's wedding. When Catherine said her vows, her voice trembling with emotion, I noticed Melissa dab at her eyes with a tissue. From a distance, it probably looked like she was moved by the ceremony's beauty, but I knew better. Those tears were frustration and panic, the emotional response of someone whose carefully laid plans had just exploded in her face. "You may kiss the bride!" The crowd erupted in applause as Dylan and Catherine sealed their union with a kiss that looked genuinely passionate, despite being performed in front of 200 witnesses. Even I found myself clapping, caught up in the moment's authentic joy. Rachel leaned over and whispered, "How are you feeling?" "Like justice," I whispered back. As the newly married couple walked back down the aisle, beaming and waving to their guests, Rachel and I fell into line behind them. The maid of honor and her date, perfectly positioned for the recessional photos that would be shared across social media within hours. I kept my expression pleasantly neutral as we passed Melissa's row, but I could feel her eyes tracking our movement like a laser sight. She was probably trying to figure out when and how I'd connected with Rachel, how long this had been planned, whether this was coincidence or conspiracy. The answer was definitely conspiracy, but she'd never be able to prove it. The cocktail hour was held on a covered terrace overlooking the estate's gardens, with waiters circulating among the guests, carrying trays of champagne and elaborate canapes. I accepted a glass of Dom Perignon and surveyed the crowd, noting how people were clustering into their various social circles. Melissa was holding court near the fountain with a group of women I recognized from her Instagram posts, the kind of friends who traveled in packs and measured their worth in social media engagement. She was talking animatedly, her hands gesturing as she told what was probably a carefully edited version of recent events. But I could see the strain in her posture, the way she kept glancing over at Rachel and me despite being mid-conversation. "She looks rattled," Rachel observed, following my gaze. "Good," I replied. She should be. Have you two talked yet? Not yet. I'm waiting for the right moment. Rachel smiled with wicked anticipation. This is so much better than I hoped. Look at her friends' faces. They're dying to know what's going on. She was right. Melissa's social circle was buzzing with obvious curiosity, their eyes ping-ponging between our group and theirs like spectators at a tennis match. The wedding had become secondary entertainment to the unfolding personal drama. Jake Lawson? I turned to find Dylan Hayes himself approaching, his new wife on his arm. He was taller than I'd expected, with the kind of confident bearing that came with generational wealth and Ivy League education. But his smile seemed genuine as he extended his hand. Dylan, I replied, accepting the handshake. Congratulations. Beautiful ceremony. Thank you, and thank you for being Rachel's date. She was worried about having to fend off Great Aunt Margaret's matchmaking attempts all evening. Catherine laughed. Great Aunt Margaret has been introducing Rachel to suitable young men since she turned 18. Most of them are about as exciting as watching paint dry. Jake's definitely an improvement, Rachel said, squeezing my arm affectionately. Much better conversation than trust fund babies and hedge fund princes. What do you do for work? Dylan asked, and I could see genuine interest in his eyes. Whatever else he might be, he didn't seem like the type to judge people based on their bank account balance. Strategic consulting, I replied. I help companies navigate complex transitions and resolve internal conflicts. That sounds fascinating. What kind of conflicts? I smiled, thinking about the irony of the question. Usually situations where one party has been operating under false assumptions about the other party's intentions. The key is bringing everyone's true motivations into the light, Catherine nodded thoughtfully. That must require a lot of patience and planning. It does, I agreed. But the resolution is usually worth the wait. From the corner of my eye, I caught Melissa approaching our group. She detached herself from her friends and was making her way over with the kind of determined smile that meant she was about to do something she'd probably regret. Dylan, she called out, her voice slightly too bright. Congratulations! The ceremony was absolutely beautiful. Dylan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as he turned to greet his ex-girlfriend. Melissa, thank you for coming. I wouldn't have missed it, she replied, then looked directly at me with challenge in her eyes. Jake, what a surprise seeing you here. Hello, Melissa, I said calmly. You look lovely. The compliment clearly caught her off guard. She probably expected anger, jealousy, maybe even a public confrontation. Instead, she got the same polite courtesy I'd show any casual acquaintance. I didn't realize you knew Dylan's family, she continued, probing for information. I invited Jake as my date, Rachel interjected smoothly. We met at a networking event a few weeks ago. Turned out to be perfect timing. I was dreading coming to this thing alone. Melissa's eyes flicked between Rachel and me, clearly trying to calculate the timeline. When had we met? How long had this been planned? Was this the reason I'd been so calm about her supposed girls' day? How nice, she said finally, but the words sounded strangled. We should probably go find our seats, Catherine said tactfully, sensing the tension. Dinner will be starting soon. As the group dispersed, Melissa lingered, clearly wanting to corner me for a private conversation. But Rachel smoothly linked arms with me and steered us toward the dining area. Not yet, she murmured. Let her simmer a little longer. The reception space was a marvel of event planning. Round tables dressed in cream linens, centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus, soft lighting that made everyone look like they belonged in a fairy tale. Our table was positioned perfectly to overlook the dance floor, while maintaining a clear sightline to where Melissa had been seated with the other Plus Friends guests. I found myself genuinely enjoying the evening as courses came and went. Rachel was excellent company, intelligent, funny, and blessed with the kind of social grace that made conversation flow effortlessly. Under different circumstances, I might have been developing real feelings for her. But tonight wasn't about romance. Tonight was about consequences. As the dinner plates were cleared and the band began setting up for dancing, I finally allowed myself to check my phone. Melissa had sent 17 text messages in the past 2 hours, each one more frantic than the last. We need to talk. What are you doing here? This isn't funny, Jake. Answer your phone. I can explain everything. Please don't do this. You're embarrassing me. Fine. Ignore me, but we're talking when you get home. I showed the messages to Rachel, who read them with obvious delight. She's completely losing it, Rachel observed. I love how she thinks you're the one embarrassing her. The irony is beautiful, I agreed. The band launched into their first song, and Dylan led Catherine onto the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. They moved together with the easy grace of people genuinely in love, lost in their own private moment despite the audience surrounding them. As the song ended and other couples began joining them on the floor, Rachel stood and extended her hand to me. Shall we? Absolutely. We moved onto the dance floor just as the band transitioned into something slow and romantic. Rachel was an excellent dancer, following my lead with the kind of natural rhythm that made us look like we'd been partners for years rather than hours. You're full of surprises, Jake Lawson, she said as we swayed together. The night's not over yet, I replied. From across the dance floor, I could see Melissa watching us with naked fury. She'd managed to find a dance partner, some cousin or family friend who'd taken pity on her obvious distress, but her attention was entirely focused on Rachel and me. Good. Let her watch. Let her see what it felt like to be on the outside looking in, to have front row seats to someone else's happiness while her own world crumbled around her. The song ended, and I spun Rachel out and back in with a flourish that earned appreciative murmurs from nearby couples. As the band launched into something more upbeat, we decided to take a break and headed back to our table. That's when Melissa finally made her move. Jake. Melissa's voice cut through the music and conversation like a blade. She was standing beside our table, her face flushed with what looked like equal parts anger and desperation. We need to talk. Now. I looked up from my conversation with Rachel about the band's song selection, my expression mildly curious. Do we? Yes. Her voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. In private. Rachel started to stand, clearly intending to give us space, but I touched her arm gently. Whatever you need to say, you can say it here, I told Melissa. Rachel doesn't mind. Melissa's eyes flicked to Rachel with obvious irritation. This is between us, Jake. It's personal. Personal? I repeated, as if the word was foreign. We're at a wedding, Melissa. Everything here is pretty public. A few people at nearby tables had started to notice the tension, their conversations dropping to murmurs as they tuned in to what was clearly becoming the evening's entertainment. I could see phones being discreetly positioned for photos, social media antennae twitching at the scent of drama. Melissa must have noticed too because she lowered her voice and leaned closer. Please, she said, and for the first time that evening, her mask slipped enough to show genuine desperation. Just 5 minutes. I can explain everything. I pretended to consider her request, taking a slow sip of my wine while she waited. The silence stretched between us like a wire under tension. Okay, I said finally, but here's fine. I'm comfortable where I am. Jake, you wanted to talk, so talk. She glanced around at the growing audience, her jaw working as she tried to figure out how to handle a conversation she'd clearly planned to have in private. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, when her carefully constructed social image collided with the reality of her choices. Fine, she said, straightening to her full height. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but showing up here with her is childish and manipulative. Is it? I asked mildly. Because I was invited, as Rachel's date, to a lovely wedding that I'm very much enjoying. You were invited because you wanted to get back at me for going to Dylan's wedding. I wasn't aware you'd gone to Dylan's wedding, I lied smoothly. I thought you were having a spa day with Sarah. The color drained from Melissa's face as she realized I'd just publicly called out her lie. Around us, the conversations had stopped entirely now. Even the band seemed to be playing more quietly, as if they sensed the drama unfolding on the sidelines. That's not... I can explain that. Can you? I interrupted, my voice still perfectly calm. Because I'd love to hear the explanation for why you told me you weren't invited to this wedding, then spent the day getting ready for what you claimed was a casual girls' trip to the spa. Melissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She'd been prepared for a private argument, maybe some tears and accusations behind closed doors. But this public dismantling of her lies was something she'd never seen coming. I didn't want to hurt your feelings, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. By lying to me for weeks? By making you feel left out of something that didn't matter? I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. So you lied to protect my feelings. How thoughtful. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Melissa? Help me understand? She looked around desperately, probably hoping someone would rescue her from this conversation. But Dylan was across the room with his new wife, and her friends were watching from their table like spectators at a gladiator match. I made a mistake, she said, her voice starting to crack. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. But once I started lying, I didn't know how to stop. It was probably the most honest thing she'd said all evening, but it was too little and far too late. The truth, I repeated. You mean the truth about RSVPing to this wedding months ago? Or the truth about the late-night text conversations with Dylan? Or maybe the truth about trying on 4 different outfits this morning for what was supposed to be a casual spa day? Each revelation hit her like a physical blow. Her face went from pale to ashen as she realized exactly how much I knew about her deception. You've been spying on me, she whispered. I've been paying attention, I corrected. Amazing what you notice when you stop taking someone at face value. Rachel had been quietly watching this exchange, her expression a mix of fascination and discomfort. Now she reached over and touched my arm gently. Jake, she said softly. Maybe we should... No, Melissa snapped, her composure finally breaking completely. No, this is perfect. This is exactly what he wanted, to humiliate me in front of all these people, to make me look like some kind of crazy ex-girlfriend while he plays the victim. I'm not playing anything, I said, standing up slowly. I'm simply existing at a wedding I was invited to with a date who actually wanted me here. The words hit their target perfectly. Melissa flinched like I'd slapped her. That's what this is really about, isn't it? She continued, her voice rising. You couldn't stand that Dylan chose me over some random stranger. You couldn't handle that I still matter to him. Melissa, Dylan's voice cut through her tirade like ice water. He'd appeared beside our table without warning, his face tight with embarrassment and anger. That's enough. She whirled to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks now. Dylan, You need to leave, he said quietly. This is my wedding day, and you're making a scene? I wasn't making a scene until She gestured wildly at me. Jake was having a quiet dinner with his date, Dylan replied firmly. You're the one shouting in front of my guests. The public dismissal was brutal and final. Melissa stood there for a moment, looking between Dylan and me like she couldn't quite process what had happened. Then she grabbed her purse from a nearby chair and pushed through the crowd toward the exit, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The silence that followed her departure was deafening. 200 guests trying to pretend they hadn't just witnessed a complete emotional breakdown. Finally, Dylan turned to me with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry about that, he said. I had no idea she was going to... we knew she might be dramatic, but that was something else entirely. It's not your fault, I replied, settling back into my chair. Sometimes people create their own consequences. Catherine appeared at Dylan's side, having navigated through the crowd to check on the situation. Is everything okay? She asked, her concern genuine despite the circumstances. Everything's fine now, Dylan assured her. Just a little drama that's been resolved. Rachel squeezed my hand under the table. You okay? She whispered. Perfect, I said, and meant it completely. As Dylan and Catherine moved away to reassure other guests that the excitement was over, the conversations gradually resumed their normal volume. The band launched into something upbeat and celebratory, and couples began returning to the dance floor. That was intense, Rachel said, taking a large gulp of her wine. That was necessary, I replied. Do you feel better now? I considered the question seriously. Did I feel better? Melissa was gone, probably crying in her car in the parking lot. Her lies had been exposed in the most public way possible. Her reputation among Dylan's social circle was permanently damaged. And I felt empty. Satisfied, but empty. I feel like justice was served, I said finally. Rachel studied my face with those intelligent dark eyes. But revenge isn't as sweet as people claim it is. Are you having regrets? About what she did? No. About exposing her lies? No. About the way it ended? I paused, thinking. Maybe. She brought it on herself, Jake. You didn't force her to lie to you for weeks. You didn't make her create this elaborate deception. All you did was show up to a wedding you were legitimately invited to. She was right, of course. But that didn't make the taste in my mouth any less bitter. Dance with me, Rachel said suddenly, standing and extending her hand. Let's wash the bad energy away with something good. I let her pull me back onto the dance floor, where the band was playing something slow and romantic. As we moved together, I found myself genuinely relaxing for the first time all evening. The weight of the past few weeks, the planning, the anger, the careful orchestration of tonight's events, was finally lifting from my shoulders. Thank you, I said as we swayed together. For what? For helping me tonight. For being my partner in crime. For being excellent company despite the circumstances. Rachel smiled up at me. It was my pleasure, though I have to admit I'm a little disappointed it's over so quickly. The wedding, the mystery, the intrigue, the elaborate revenge plot, she laughed softly. My life is usually much more boring than this. Boring can be good, I said. Honest and boring beats exciting and deceptive every time. Is that your takeaway from all this? I thought about it as we turned together on the dance floor, the fairy lights overhead casting everything in a warm golden glow. My takeaway is that I want someone who chooses to be with me, I said finally. Not someone who lies about wanting to be somewhere else. That seems like a reasonable standard, revolutionary even. We danced in comfortable silence for a while, and I found myself genuinely enjoying Rachel's company. She was smart, funny, beautiful, and refreshingly direct. Under different circumstances, this could have been the beginning of something real. But tonight had been about ending something false, not starting something new. As the song wound down, my phone buzzed with a text message. Then another. Then a rapid series of notifications that suggested Melissa had moved from the parking lot to somewhere with better cell service. Popular man, Rachel observed, nodding toward my pocket with a slight smirk. I doubt it's fan mail, I muttered, fishing the phone out. The screen lit up with a staggering number, 23 messages from Melissa in the past hour. I didn't even have to open them to know it was going to be a ride. I scrolled anyway. First came the fury. I hope you're proud of yourself. You completely humiliated me in front of everyone. Dylan won't even look at me now. Then the guilt trip started to seep in. All of his friends think I'm psychotic. I can't believe you planned this whole thing just to hurt me. 3 years together, and this is how you end it? Rachel leaned slightly, catching a glimpse of my expression. Melissa? I nodded once, jaw tight. Back on the screen, the text kept unspooling, moving through every stage of meltdown like she'd Googled emotional manipulation and decided to hit all the bullet points. I made one mistake and you destroyed my entire social life. Please call me. We can work this out. I love you, Jake. I know I screwed up, but I love you. A bitter laugh slipped out. Rachel raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Fine, don't answer. But this isn't over. You can't just throw away 3 years because of one stupid lie. I was trying to protect your feelings. I sighed, thumb hovering over the screen. Still more. I never meant for any of this to happen. Please, come home so we can talk like adults. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Just please call me back. It was like watching someone drown in their own words, clawing for any angle that might pull me back in. You're being cruel, Jake. This isn't like you. The Jake I know wouldn't do something this vindictive. I guess I never really knew you at all. Rachel broke the silence. She's spiraling. Yeah, I said flatly. She's going for the Oscar. I didn't need to read the rest, but I did. Thanks for showing me who you really are. Don't bother coming home tonight. I'll have your stuff packed. Actually, scratch that. It's my apartment. You can pack your own stuff. I hope she was worth it. I hope you're happy now. I never want to see you again. I scrolled through the messages with a kind of detached fascination, watching her emotional journey play out in real time. The anger, the bargaining, the attempts at manipulation, the threats, the promises. It was like a textbook case study in someone realizing they'd lost control of a situation they'd created. That bad? Rachel asked, reading my expression. She's having a moment, I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket without responding to any of the messages. Are you going to reply? Eventually. But not tonight. The band announced the last dance, and Dylan and Catherine took the floor again for a final moment as the evening's guests of honor. They looked radiantly happy, completely absorbed in each other and oblivious to the drama that had unfolded earlier. Good for them. They deserved their perfect wedding day, and Melissa's meltdown would eventually become just another story in their family's collection of wedding disasters. Ready to call it a night? Rachel asked as the music ended and guests began gathering their things. More than ready, I replied. We said our goodbyes to Dylan and Catherine, who both thanked me for coming and made polite noises about hoping to see me again soon. Whether they meant it or were just being gracious hosts, I couldn't tell. But it didn't matter. I'd accomplished what I'd come here to do. Rachel walked me to my car, her heels clicking softly on the cobblestone drive. So, she said, leaning against my car door, this has been the most interesting wedding I've ever attended. I hope that's a good thing. It's definitely been memorable. She paused, studying my face in the parking lot's soft lighting. What happens now? Now I go home and figure out how to untangle 3 years of my life from someone who turned out to be a stranger. That sounds lonely. It sounds honest, I corrected. I'm done with pretty lies. Rachel nodded, understanding without judgment. Well, if you ever want company while you're figuring things out, I make excellent coffee, and I'm a very good listener. I might take you up on that, I said, and realized I meant it. She leaned up and kissed my cheek, a soft brush of lips that smelled like roses and possibility. Take care of yourself, Jake Lawson, she said. And remember, you didn't break anything tonight. You just stopped pretending something broken was whole. The drive home gave me 45 minutes to think about Rachel's words and what I was going to find when I walked through my apartment door. Melissa's threats about packing my things were probably empty. She'd made similar declarations during smaller fights before, only to pretend they'd never happen the next morning. But this wasn't a smaller fight. This was the end of everything we'd built together, and we both knew it. I parked in my usual spot and sat in the car for a moment, looking up at our third-floor apartment windows. The lights were on, which meant Melissa was home and probably waiting for the confrontation she'd been promising in her text messages. Time to face the music. The apartment was eerily quiet when I unlocked the front door. No music, no television, no sounds of movement from the kitchen or bedroom. Just the kind of heavy silence that suggested someone was lying in wait. Melissa, I called out, hanging my keys on the hook by the door. In here. Her voice came from the living room, carefully controlled and artificially calm. I found her sitting on our couch, still wearing the emerald dress from the wedding, but with her makeup washed off and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked younger without the carefully applied cosmetics, and more vulnerable. A part of me felt sorry for her. But a larger part remembered the past few hours and hardened my heart accordingly. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Yes, we do. I remained standing, not wanting to settle into what might become a long, circular argument. But first, I have a question. Okay. How long have you been texting with Dylan? She blinked, clearly thrown by the directness of the question. We're not talking about Dylan. We're talking about what you did tonight. Answer the question, Melissa. I don't see how that's relevant. Humor me. She was quiet for a long moment, probably trying to figure out how much I actually knew versus how much I was guessing. We've stayed in touch, she said finally. On and off. It's not what you think. I leaned forward slightly. What do I think? That there's something romantic happening. There isn't. Define on and off. Her eyes narrowed. Jake, this is ridiculous. You're interrogating me like I'm some kind of criminal. You lied to me for months, Melissa. About the wedding, about your relationship with Dylan, about where you were going and what you were doing. So yes, I'm asking direct questions. Answer them. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back again. Fine. We text sometimes, maybe once a week. It's just friendly conversation. About what? Work? Mutual friends? Nothing important? Show me. Her head jerked toward me. What? Show me the text messages. If they're just friendly conversation, you won't mind me seeing them. The request landed like a physical blow. Her face went pale again, and I knew I'd hit another lie. I'm not showing you my private messages, she said, her voice rising. That's an invasion of privacy. But you don't mind invading my privacy by lying about where you spend your weekends? That's different. How? Because I was trying to protect you. From what? The truth? From getting hurt over something that doesn't matter. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Doesn't matter? You've been secretly communicating with your ex-boyfriend, lying about attending his wedding and playing dress-up for someone who isn't me. But it doesn't matter? It's not like that, she insisted, though her voice weakened with each denial. Then what is it like? Explain it to me in a way that makes sense. She sank back onto the couch, her fight finally deflating. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know how to explain it. Try. Her gaze drifted away. Dylan and I, we have history, real history. And when he got engaged, it felt like the end of something important. I wanted to be there to see it happen, to say goodbye to that chapter of my life properly. So you lied to me instead of having an adult conversation about it. I knew you wouldn't understand. You're right, I don't understand. I don't understand why you couldn't trust me enough to tell the truth. I don't understand why you thought lying was better than honesty. And I don't understand why you're still defending your choices instead of taking responsibility for them. Tears were streaming down her face now, but I found myself unmoved by them. I'd seen her cry before during arguments, watched her use tears as weapons when logic failed her. Tonight, they just looked like the last desperate tool in a depleted arsenal. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry, Jake. I know I messed up. But we can fix this. We can work through it. Can we? Because I don't think you actually understand what you did wrong. I lied about the wedding. You lied about everything, I interrupted, for weeks. You created an elaborate deception that required you to lie to my face every single day. You made me feel crazy for suspecting something was wrong. You turned our relationship into a performance where I was the only one who didn't know we were acting. It wasn't supposed to go this far, but it did. And when you had multiple chances to come clean, you doubled down instead. Even tonight, even after everything that happened, your first instinct was to blame me for your embarrassment. She was sobbing now, ugly crying that shook her whole body. Please don't leave me, she gasped. Please, Jake. I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you. And there it was, the manipulation I'd been waiting for. The declaration of love designed to make me feel guilty for having standards. The emotional blackmail disguised as vulnerability. No, I said quietly. You don't love me, Melissa. You love the idea of me. You love having someone stable and dependable waiting at home while you chase excitement elsewhere. But you don't love me enough to tell me the truth. You don't love me enough to choose me over your ex-boyfriend, and you don't love me enough to take responsibility for your actions without making me the villain. That's not true, isn't it? Because if you loved me, really loved me, tonight never would have happened. We would have had an honest conversation weeks ago about your feelings for Dylan. We would have worked through it together, like adults. Instead, you chose deception and drama. I walked to the bedroom and pulled my suitcase out of the closet, the sound of the zipper loud in the sudden silence. What are you doing? She asked from the doorway. Leaving. You can't just leave. Watch me. I started packing efficiently, taking only what I needed for a few weeks, while I figured out more permanent arrangements. Clothes, toiletries, laptop, important documents. Everything else could wait. Jake, please, don't do this. Not like this. How should I do it, Melissa? Should I lie to you about where I'm going? Should I pretend everything is fine while secretly planning my exit? Should I gaslight you into thinking you're crazy for suspecting something is wrong? Each question hit home, and she flinched with every word. I get it, she whispered. You're angry. You have every right to be angry. But we can work through this if you'll just give us a chance. We had 3 years of chances, I replied, folding my shirts with mechanical precision. You used them all up tonight. I finished packing in silence while she stood in the doorway watching me. When I was done, I turned to face her one last time. I'll be back next weekend for the rest of my things, I said. I'd appreciate it if you weren't here when I come. Where are you going to go? That's not your concern anymore. Jake, we're done, Melissa. We're done pretending this relationship is something it isn't. We're done pretending you're someone you aren't. And we're done pretending I'm willing to accept lies as long as they're wrapped up in pretty enough packaging. I walked past her toward the front door, my suitcase wheels clicking on the hardwood floor. I hope she was worth it, she called after me, her voice thick with bitterness. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob and turned back one final time. She wasn't part of this, Melissa. This was about you and me and the choices you made. Don't try to rewrite history now that you don't like how it ended. So what? You're just going to ride off into the sunset with Dylan's cousin? Have your perfect revenge romance? I'm going to rebuild my life with people who value honesty, I said. What you call revenge, I call consequences. I walked out and closed the door behind me, cutting off whatever response she might have had. In the hallway, I could hear her crying through the door. Harsh, broken sobs that might have moved me a few hours earlier. But I was done being moved by Melissa Grant's tears. I was done being moved by Melissa Grant, period. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from Rachel. How did it go? I typed back. It's over. Thank you for tonight. Are you okay? I sat in my car for a moment, considering the question seriously. Was I okay? My relationship of 3 years had just ended in spectacular fashion. I was essentially homeless for the immediate future. My social circle was probably buzzing with gossip about tonight's events. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't questioning my own sanity. I wasn't wondering if I was overreacting or being paranoid. I wasn't making excuses for someone else's behavior or trying to rationalize away my own feelings. I'm free, I texted back, and that feels pretty okay. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown, reading the Sunday paper and enjoying the kind of peaceful morning that had become routine since leaving Melissa. No drama, no hidden agendas, no need to decode cryptic text messages or analyze every conversation for signs of deception, just quiet, honest simplicity. Jake? I looked up to find Melissa standing beside my table, coffee cup in hand, and uncertainty written across her face. She looked different, thinner, more subdued, like someone who'd spent the past 6 months learning hard lessons about consequences. Melissa, I said neutrally. How are you? I'm okay, she replied, though she didn't look it. Can I sit? Just for a minute? I gestured to the empty chair across from me, curious about what had brought her here. We hadn't spoken since the night I'd moved out, communicating only through text messages about logistics when I'd collected my remaining belongings. I've been thinking about that night, she said without preamble. The wedding? Have you? I owe you an apology, a real one, not the defensive stuff I said when you were packing. I set down my newspaper and gave her my full attention. I'm listening. You were right about everything, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I was lying to you, I was lying to myself, and I was using our relationship as a safety net while I chased something that was never really there. What brought on this revelation? Therapy, mostly. And the fact that Dylan blocked my number 2 weeks after the wedding, she laughed bitterly. Turns out he wasn't interested in maintaining our friendship once he realized what I was actually trying to do, which was win him back, I think. Or at least prove to myself that I still could. She shook her head. I don't even know anymore. The whole thing was stupid and selfish and unfair to everyone involved. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But she seemed genuinely remorseful, deflated in a way that suggested real self-reflection rather than strategic positioning. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. It means something. Does it change anything? Between us? No. But it's good to hear that you understand what actually happened. She nodded, accepting the boundary without argument. I heard you're seeing Rachel. We've been dating for a few months, yes. Are you happy? The question seemed genuine, so I answered honestly. Very much. She's everything you pretended to be. Melissa flinched slightly, but didn't argue. Good. You deserve that. We sat in silence for a moment, two people who'd once shared a life now sitting across from each other like polite strangers. I should go, she said finally, standing up. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, for all of it. You didn't deserve what I put you through. No, I didn't, I agreed. But I'm glad it happened. Really? Really. It taught me what I actually want in a partner, and it led me to someone who gives me that. She smiled sadly. I hope she knows how lucky she is. I tell her every day. Melissa walked away without looking back, and I watched her go with something approaching peace. The anger I'd carried for months had finally dissipated, replaced by a kind of satisfied closure. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Still on for brunch at 11? Absolutely, I typed back. Just had an interesting encounter. Good interesting or bad interesting? Closure, interesting. Tell you about it when I see you. Can't wait. Love you. Love you too. I put my phone away and returned to my newspaper, but I found myself smiling instead of reading. In a few hours, I'd be having brunch with a woman who'd never lied to me, never played games with my emotions, never made me question my own reality. A woman who'd chosen to be with me from the very beginning and who continued to choose me every single day. Melissa Grant had taught me what I didn't want in a relationship. But Rachel Ford was showing me what I did want, and it was everything I'd never known I was missing. The coffee shop door chimed as another customer entered, and I looked up instinctively. A young couple, clearly in love, laughing about something as they approached the counter to order. They reminded me of Rachel and myself in those early weeks, that giddy excitement of discovering someone who actually saw and appreciated who you really were. I thought about the wedding 6 months ago, about the moment Melissa's face had gone white with shock as she realized her carefully constructed deception was crumbling in real time. At the time, I'd felt satisfied by her humiliation. Justice served, consequences delivered. But now, watching this happy couple place their order, I realized the real victory hadn't been Melissa's downfall. It had been walking away from someone who didn't value me enough to tell me the truth, and finding someone who did. The rest was just theater,